I got the hat off a friend of mine, and my jacket was from my other incredibly tall friend, and my dad's handkerchief. So yeah, I'm a bit of a mishmash actually, yeah. My name's Joolz, and I'm from London.
Joolz Guides is a YouTube channel dedicated to showing you a virtual tour of London, showing you interesting facts and treasures which you might not be able to find in the typical guidebook. His particular proficiency and jolly jests has earned his videos over 1 million views, and his comical character and dignified dress sense place him firmly on the weird side of YouTube.
Bowler hat and an umbrella. You'll be surprised, without the hat and umbrella, it looks completely different. The funny thing is that people really stare as if I'm something outlandish. And I was walking through Camden, making a video in Camden yesterday, and I mean, the amount of staring that you get. Have you seen the people in Camden? I mean, there's people with piercings and like bones through their noses and all sorts. No one takes the blind bit of notice of them. You walk around in a bowler hat with an umbrella. I'm not even wearing a suit. I mean, it's like, and everyone just stares at you as if you're some sort of freak. I do find people weird sometimes. That nice building at the end with the 2 turrets is Smithfield Market, meat market, oldest wholesale market in London. There's a nice history and stuff about the market on the wall here. It was quite famous for being a place where people were hanged and burnt at the stake and turned into martyrs and stuff. Look. The other thing, incidentally, which is quite amusing about Smithfield, is this is quite a famous place where people used to come and sell their wife. It wasn't legal, but to get a divorce was so expensive. So some people decided to sell their wife, and they'd bring their wife down here with a halter around their neck as a kind of symbol. So she'd be like on a lead, led down to Smithfield Market, where you could have a bidding war with somebody, and then a town crier with his big bell would go through going, oh yay, Kai has sold his wife to John. Quite amazing, really. Rather than these typical kind of touristy videos where people are, you know, throwing £50 notes up in the air in slow motion and drinking champagne on the beach. I mean, I do a gritty, real version of what London is really like. It's a pity about the telephone boxes in London now. They're all thinking about what to do with them because, you know, now that no one needs telephone boxes, and I mean, I just generally use them as public lavatories. Sarcastic, cynical remarks, joviality. I'm just sort of an old friend, an old cousin or something, an old uncle showing you around London. That's what I've been told. Cock Lane, my very pleasingly named street. I can't help it that when I go to the Piccadilly line and I get on a train and it's bound for Cockfosters, I can't help smiling. I don't know about you. I just find it's pleasing. It's pleasing. And in the same way that there's a boy with his cock out in Cock Lane, I just find it quite amusing.
What's the story behind this boy with his cock out?
He's called the Golden Boy of Pie Corner. When the Fire of London took place, this is as far as it reached. It's supposed to mark the boundary of the Fire of London. And what happened was that they accused several people of starting it. I think they blamed it on the Dutch, and they blamed it on the Jews, and they tried to blame everybody for having started the Fire of London. One guy was called Robert Hubert, who was a Frenchman who admitted it. That's right, he admitted starting the Fire of London, and then they realised that he was just a madman because he only arrived in London 2 days after the fire started, so it couldn't have been him. So they just let him off on the grounds that he was bonkers. And then they accused some guy called William Lilly, who was an astrologer, and he predicted the Fire of London using astrology, but then somehow he managed to talk his way out of it. They couldn't decide who to blame it on in the end, and in the end they thought, I know, well, let's just blame the sin of gluttony. And so they just stuck this sort of boy there who's supposed to be fat. It says he's a prodigiously fat boy. He doesn't look fat to me, even though his balls look quite fat. But you know what I find even funnier about Cock Lane is there's a haunted house down here. And the name of the ghost is Fanny Scratching. So Scratching Fanny in Cock Lane. I mean, you know, you couldn't make it up, but that is very pleasing if you ask me. I particularly love the pubs. I think that's a very English thing. They're usually very historical. There's a lot of interesting things happened in pubs. There was a pub that's closed down now. It was quite close to here, just opposite St Bartholomew's Hospital. And when people died, they used to dig up dead bodies that had been buried. They'd take them to this pub, and then they'd trade them with doctors here who wanted to study the science and cut them up, so whilst they were still quite fresh. So they had to open up this thing called a watch house here in order to stop people from doing it. They had to keep an eye on them. I think it's called the Resurrection Gate. No, what's it called? I've actually got it written down here.
So that's where you get your facts from on your mobile phone?
Well, I made some notes before I came out because I'm not so familiar with this one. I know basically the stories, but I'm a bit like Jeremy Corbyn when he goes on the radio to talk about politics, and they ask him to say exactly how much money and where from, and he's like, let me just check actually, I kind of know it.
You have a good memory then?
Not really, no, not for things. I can remember anything that from my childhood I can remember, but anything I remembered, anything I learned after adulthood, it's like a Swiss cheese, my brain. So, but anyway, what did I say? See, I just said, what was it called? Was it called the Fortune of War? I think it was called the Fortune of War, the pub. People would dig up dead bodies. So London, obviously, has got so many things to cover because it's always changing as well. So, you know, once I've covered some of the main historical places, then you can move on to interesting characters, new businesses which are opening up, you know, interesting walks from here to there. I mean, there aren't enough years in my life to cover all the things that I'd like to. I wanted to draw your attention to the chewing gum on the bridge here. Look, you see, these have all been painted by a fella. He's a bloke called Ben Wilson. He's done a whole trail of them all the way from here to the other side. You see them all over London. I think he lives in East Finchley actually. A lot of cannons were used as bollards. This cannon has killed people. This is amazing. This is a real French cannon, captured from the Battle of Waterloo. See, you don't find this in the real guidebooks.
It's got cigarettes in it.
It's a perfect ashtray these days, you know. And it looks a bit like me.
Yeah, it does.
Shakespeare and his troupe of jolly brethren, they had a theatre in Shoreditch, but I think that they were struggling to get a licence for it or something, because in those days you needed a licence for performing and stuff like that. And so one night they broke down the old theatre in Shoreditch, which they recently found actually. I think it's in Curtain Road. They've recently rediscovered it. They broke it down, they smuggled all the timbers and everything across the river, and they built the Globe Theatre here. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, their greater share of honour. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more, or rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my hosts, that he which hath no stomach for this fight, let him depart, his passport shall be made. And crowns for convoy put into his purse. Those words was first delivered in the theatre over there, on the premiere. So I was an actor, I got fed up with being an actor, and then I decided I wanted to be a TV presenter, but I was always failing. And so I thought, well, I know, why don't I try and make a documentary and use that as my kind of show reel. These actually you have to be careful because they might contain nuts. The idea of the films, they're just supposed to be cheerful and charming enough to make you go, that's the reaction I'm hoping to elicit from a viewer. Someone just goes, oh, maybe I'll watch another one of those. Yeah.
I was never very interested in history at school, gazing over texts and scribbling dates in a beige notebook, but it's fascinating to think about the centuries and centuries of other civilizations and cultures who have walked those same streets that you think you know. At first I wondered where Joolz could find so many interesting facts, but the truth is they're everywhere. The streets are full of little plaques describing the city's rich history, and in our pockets we have access to the largest knowledge base ever known. London can be big, stressful and lonely, but with a history so rich, you should never be bored.
If you've got a Sunday afternoon free and you want to go and have a wander around, which is what I like to do, then have a look at some of my guides. You know, you can find out, maybe follow some of the walks. You know.
I just want to do those close-up shots.
Do you want me to mention anything about subscribing to the channel and stuff like that? Do you want me to do one of those boring things that people do?
No,
if you want, do you want to subscribe to the channel?